Microplastic contamination of human bodies is now confirmed, widespread, and more than likely accelerating alongside global plastic production. Projections show that by 2060, plastic production could triple without dramatic policy intervention. These particles are already distributed in ocean sediment, soil, and freshwater systems, and will continue fragmenting into smaller and smaller pieces for decades, regardless of what is produced today.
Microplastics are everywhere.
They've been found in almost every organ in the body.
We're eating and drinking more plastic than we might have realized.
And you might be likely to blame your own personal behavior.
A researcher in Amsterdam draws a blood sample. Routine procedure, but when the results come back, something is wrong. Something that has no business being in human blood is there. In fact, it's in 77% of the donors tested. Not a virus, not a bacterium, but plastic. Tiny fragments of plastic circulating through the human bloodstream. The study is peer-reviewed and then published. The lead research conclusion is 3 words that should stop every person on this planet cold. We are contaminated. I'm Charles Denyer, and this is Threat Level Red, where we expose the threats, the attacks, the operations, and the dangers that shape our world and threaten our security. Today's episode, microplastics in our blood, the pollution inside your body.
Welcome to Threat Level Red, a Charles Denyer Productions podcast. Every week, Charles brings his real-world expertise to the front lines of America's most pressing threats. Cyber attacks, extremist networks, rogue states, terrorism, economic instability, systemic breakdowns, and so much more. From the digital battleground to the streets of America, no threat is left uncovered. No spin, no filters, just intel.
To understand why microplastics represent one of the most serious long-term threats to human health ever identified, you need to know 3 things. First, microplastics are everywhere, and I mean everywhere in a way that should genuinely alarm you. They are defined as plastic particles smaller than 5 millimeters, some so small they are measured in microns, smaller than a human red blood cell. They form when larger plastic products break down over time, or when they are manufactured intentionally as microbeads in cosmetics and industrial products. According to the United Nations Environment Program, over 400 million metric tons of plastic are produced globally every year. A significant portion of that will eventually fragment into microplastic particles that enter our soil, our water, our food chain, and our bodies. The World Health Organization has formally identified microplastic contamination as a global public health concern requiring urgent investigation. Second, the exposure pathways are not exotic or avoidable. You are being exposed right now through the water you drink, the food you eat, and the air you breathe. The World Health Organization found microplastics present in bottled and tap water samples across multiple countries. Peer-reviewed research published in Environmental Science and Technology estimated that Americans consume between 39,000 and 52,000 microplastic particles annually through food and drink alone. And that number climbs significantly when inhalation is factored in. They have been found in seafood, honey, beer, table salt, and fresh fruits and vegetables. To be blunt, there's no clean food category. There is no safe zone. Third, here's the part that should keep you up at night. The contamination has already crossed the threshold from environmental problem to human biology problem. Microplastics have been detected in human blood, human lung tissue, human placental samples, and human arterial plaque. They are not sitting on a beach somewhere waiting to be cleaned up. They are inside us, circulating, accumulating, and interacting with human tissue in ways that researchers are only now beginning to map. So the timeline of discovery reads like a slow-motion horror story told in peer-reviewed journals. It begins in the ocean. Researchers in the 1970s and 1980s began documenting plastic fragments in marine environments. By the early 2000s, marine biologist Richard Thompson at the University of Plymouth formally coins the term microplastics in a landmark 2004 paper documenting their accumulation in coastal sediment and marine organisms. The scientific community begins paying attention. By 2018, the Austrian Environment Agency announces the first confirmed detection of microplastics in human stool samples, proof that particles are passing through the human digestive system. In 2020, researchers publishing in the journal Physics of Fluids demonstrate that microplastics can be inhaled and deposited deep in lung tissue. In 2021, a study published in Environment International detects microplastics in human placental tissue, meaning these particles are reaching unborn children before birth. Then 2022 delivers the result that shakes the scientific community. Researchers at VU Amsterdam detect microplastics in human blood for the first time as 77% of blood donors tested positive. These particles identified include PET, the very same plastic used in water bottles. But here's where it gets worse. In 2024, a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most respected medical journals in the world, finds microplastics and nanoplastics in carotid artery plaque samples from surgical patients. Patients with detectable plastic particles in their arterial plaque had a significantly higher risk of heart attack, stroke, and death over a 34-month follow-up period. For the very first time, microplastic exposure is directly linked to cardiovascular disease outcomes in human patients. At this point, the question is no longer whether microplastics are inside us. They are. The question is, what are they doing?
Microplastics causing inflammation in our body are like gasoline on the embers of a fire around a cancer to spark and make it grow faster.
The cardiovascular study in the New England Journal of Medicine triggers immediate international response. Researchers, public health agencies, and regulatory bodies that had been cautiously monitoring the science are now confronting a direct clinical finding. This is not a rodent study. This is not an in vitro experiment. These are human patients, human arteries, and a measurable increase in mortality risk. The study's lead author calls the findings a wake-up call. The New England Journal editorial board notes the implications are significant enough to demand accelerated research into mechanisms and exposure thresholds. Shortly thereafter, the study is cited in regulatory proceedings across the European Union, and in the United States, congressional briefings are held on plastic regulation. As for microplastics, the health concerns extend well beyond cardiovascular disease, and scientists are tracking several converging threat vectors at the same time. The first is chemical toxicity. Microplastics do not arrive in the body alone. They carry with them a payload of associated chemicals, including BPA, and God only knows what else. The National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences has documented that endocrine disruptors can interfere with hormonal signaling at extremely low concentrations, affecting reproductive health, thyroid function, metabolic regulation, and developmental processes in children. The European Food Safety Authority has formally concluded that BPA poses a health risk to consumers across all age groups. The second is inflammation. Research published in the journal Chemosphere demonstrates that microplastics can induce inflammatory responses in human cell cultures. More specifically, when particles lodge in tissue, such as lung tissue, arterial plaque, and intestinal walls, they may trigger chronic low-grade inflammation, a process increasingly understood as a driver of cancer, cardiovascular disease, and neurological disorders. The third and perhaps most alarming frontier is nanoplastics. Particles so small they can cross the blood-brain barrier. A 2023 study from the University of Rhode Island demonstrated nanoplastic accumulation in mouse brain tissue following oral exposure. Human studies have not happened and they are pending, but the implication is obviously serious. We may be looking at a pathway for plastic particles to reach the central nervous system.
That's why so many of us are sick. We should not see the rise in cancer, the rise in these diseases as something like, oh, it just happens. This is not normal.
Here's what the public largely has not absorbed yet. The 2022 blood study, the placental findings, the cardiovascular link, these are not projections or models. These are peer-reviewed detections in actual human tissue samples from people alive today. The global scientific consensus points to the following conclusions. Microplastic contamination of human bodies is now confirmed, widespread, and more than likely accelerating alongside global plastic production. The long-term picture has two dimensions, what we know and what we fear. Okay, as for what we know, plastic production is not slowing down. Projections show that by 2060, plastic production could triple without dramatic policy intervention. As such, microplastic contamination in the environment will no doubt grow proportionally. These particles are already distributed in ocean sediment, soil, and freshwater systems, and will continue fragmenting into smaller and smaller pieces for decades, regardless of what is produced today. As for what we fear, a generation of chronic disease linked to ubiquitous chemical and particle exposure that nobody systematically regulated, nobody fully studied, and nobody warned the public about until the particles were already in our blood. The parallel to leaded gasoline, a substance used globally for decades before its neurotoxic effects were fully acknowledged and acted upon, is one researchers themselves are beginning to invoke. The regulatory response so far has been fragmented. The European Union has moved to restrict intentionally added microplastics in products. The United States has banned microbeads in rinse-off cosmetics, but has no comprehensive framework addressing the broader microplastic exposure problem. A global plastics treaty is currently under negotiations through the United Nations, but as of 2025, no binding international agreement is in force. So what really happened here? Well, over 50 years, the global economy built an infrastructure of convenience on a material designed to never decompose, and then expressed surprise when it didn't decompose. The science on microplastic health risks were not hidden. The World Health Organization flagged it. Peer-reviewed research has been accumulating since the early 2000s. What failed was not intelligence, it was political will and regulatory urgency. The result is a contamination event that is now inside human bodies, in every country on Earth, and no established safe exposure limit. This is what I call a systemic, long-term, and largely irreversible threat. Here's what you need to understand. Microplastics are not a future threat. They are a present reality inside you, inside me, right now, whether you drink filtered water, eat organic food, or live miles from the nearest factory. The question science is racing to answer is not whether exposure is occurring. It is what the exposure will cost us in decades of chronic disease, developmental harm, and neurological effects that we will not be able to fully trace back to their source. The full human toll of this invisible invasion will not be known for generations. But the science we have now is already telling us something we cannot afford to ignore. We did not choose this exposure. We are all living with it. And the decisions made in the next decades about plastic production, chemical regulation, and global environmental policy will determine whether our children's generations face something far worse. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Charles Denyer. This is Threat Level Red.
Threat Level Red is a Charles Denyer Productions podcast. For more information, visit charlesdenyer.com to learn more about current and upcoming podcasts and episodes, current and future book publications, professional services offered by Charles, and much more. All opinions expressed are those of the host and do not reflect the official positions of any government agency, military branch, or national security organization.